Welcome back for part 2 of PS4 game collection. There will be a part 3 which you'll have the remaining PS4 along with what PS5 I have so far. So with that said, starting off today we have No Man's Sky. Of course, a game that really turned itself around over time. And I do highly recommend to anyone who has the opportunity to try out No Man's Sky. It's legit really good. And enjoy the music, by the way, today from Dark Souls 3. Next up, we have Okami HD, which is a true modern classic from Capcom. If you've never actually played Okami, I highly recommend checking it out. It is awesome, plus it's based on actual mythology. Next up, we have Oddworld Soulstorm Day 1 edition, which includes a pretty cool steelbook. Now, personally, I have yet to actually play Soulstorm, so I'll be curious to see how it is. I've heard from a lot of people it plays very similar to the first games. It also has, for some reason, a lot of action set pieces as well, with robots. Next up, Omen of Sorrow, which is an interesting fighting game, to say the least. Definitely a highly overlooked game, unfortunately. Does it look the greatest? No. It looks like some actually from, I would say, PS3 era, but I personally don't judge games strictly on their graphics, but gameplay, and it actually does have, I think, overall reasonably good gameplay. It's not one of the greatest experiences, but it's an interesting, unique experience that you can have with this game. Next, we have an interesting game called Override Mech City Brawl, which, of course, as you see, advertises Season Pass. It's basically just an online multiplayer game for the most part, unfortunately. I didn't realize that until after I actually grabbed it. Next up, Risk of Rain, and luckily also includes a copy of the original Risk of Rain. Very different games between the two. Done by Gearbox, still a pretty cool indie developed game. Graphically, 1 and 2 are night and day differences. Personally, I like overall the design and everything of Risk of Rain 2, though I haven't actually played the first game as of yet, so we'll see once I actually try it out. But seriously, if you get a chance, you can get this very reasonably priced, and I highly recommend it. Also, Scarlet Nexus. Definitely an interesting game, to say the least. If you like games like Ninja Gaiden and games of that sort with the anime aesthetic, I actually do highly recommend this game. Also, the very unique creature designs as well. It's one thing that helps make this a little more distinctive. Next up, Shadow of the Colossus remake. Definitely a superb game. I highly recommend to anyone who gets the opportunity. Try Shadow of the Colossus. It definitely deserves a lot more love than it gets. Next, we have the awesome HD remaster of the first two Shenmue games, which is pretty cool to be able to play them on modern platforms and not strictly stuck forever on the Dreamcast and original Xbox. Next up, we have Shenmue 3, of course. I remember getting this day one. Personally, I don't know, a lot of people hate on this game. I think people kind of miss the whole point of the Shimu games. Also, it's a pretty cool steel book, which is pretty awesome as well. Next up, we have Soul Calibur 6, which is a game I've definitely played and recorded quite a bit of footage of this game. As I love it, I also love the steelbook that comes with it and everything. Soul Calibur 6 has easily become probably in my top 3 favorite Soul Calibur games of all time. Also, I like quite a bit the cover art with Mitsurugi and, of course, Gerald of Rivia. Next up, Miles Morales Spider-Man, of course, as it's called Launch Edition. Luckily, it also includes a free PS5 upgrade. It's pretty cool. Definitely, Miles Morales, I think in some areas I actually ended up enjoying more than the original Spider-Man. Next, probably one of the coolest indie games that I've picked up, definitely. Spiritfarer. Definitely a very unique idea and take indie game, very different from many other experiences out there. Then we have a interesting VR game. Sadly, it's not one of the best VR games I've tried. Still, it is interesting for what it is, and given I got it back a few years ago dirt cheap. Next up, the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, which of course I had to get this day one just for the amount of games. The fact it actually included the original Street Fighter, multiple versions of Street Fighter 2, all the alpha games, and for other people also has all the Street Fighter 3 games. Then you have original base version Street Fighter 5, which I still will say Street Fighter 5's logo is arguably the best of the series. Then you have Arcade Edition with Akuma on the cover art, which was definitely a smart choice. And then you have the final with Gil on the cover art, which is maybe the best of the 3 covers. Next up, we have Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition. If you've tried the Tales series, arguably it's probably one of the better modern Tales games. Though I'm not sure if anything will ever surpass Symphonia for the GameCube. Next, we have, of course, Tekken 7, base version Day 1 edition, as it says right there. Yeah, I got this Day 1, had it pre-ordered in advance and everything. And recently decided to go back and start playing a little bit here and there again of Tekken 7. It's been kind of a refreshing experience. Especially, it's been fun getting to replay a little with King, specifically, as well as Heihachi, which I will miss from the series. Of course, King of Fighters 14. This was the original version, as I do love the steelbook that's included with it. Next up, you have Transformers Devastation, which is a pretty cool game, especially if you grew up with the original Transformers G1 series, you will definitely appreciate, I think, this game, and the art style is awesome in my opinion. It is kind of sad it's strictly a single player game, but it's probably for the best. At the end, I love the fact that they use on the cover art Devastator. Next up, an interesting game, to say the least, Tribes of Midgard. Basically a top-down, like co-op style game, like many other games out there. And the only reason at the end day I did end up picking this up is the fact it was on clearance. And I'm always willing to give a game a shot. If it's pretty cheap, I will always give it at least a chance. Then we have, of course, Uncharted, A Thief's End. Uncharted 4, which is pretty highly regarded by many people. Then we have Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which is awesome to have. And it is starting to become a collector's item now for this specific version of the game, as it was a limited release through GameStop only. Then we have probably one of the coolest indie games, at least in my opinion anyways. If you like creation games, the fact it has elements in it like Shovel Knight, but at the same time also has elements in it sort of like Minecraft, interestingly enough. There's definitely variety and uniqueness to the game. Also, if you like episodic style games, and also curious when it comes to VR, definitely this is one of, I think, the more interesting of the episodic format games on PS4. It's a great classic mystery game. Then you have, of course, the great experience that is The Last Guardian. Definitely a unique experience, to say the least. Of course, developed by the same people who are responsible for Shadow of the Colossus, as well as Ico. Eco, however you want to say the name. An interesting early era action game for the PS4. This was like, I believe, a launch title or some, where you could play with like basically action figures and stuff, which was an interesting concept. Basically, it's like a modern day, I guess you could say, like multiplayer take on a game or on some like Toy Story. Now, online, this is up to like a 4-player, which is interesting. Then you have White Day, which is an interesting, probably a bit more family-friendly horror game. It's definitely very different. It's also was developed, interestingly, a Korean-developed game, which makes it a little different, because there aren't a huge amount of, at least here in the West, there aren't many Korean-developed games, nor Taiwanese either. Also, Zone of the Ender's Second Runner, which even has VR capability, which is pretty cool. I just wish they would have also given the same treatment to the original Zone of the Enders. But whatever, I suppose. Next up, we have Alien Isolation. Great game, has real good suspense and horror in it that will make you dread at times in the game. But that's the signs of a solid horror game, in my opinion. Also, arguably one of the worst games in my collection. Definitely not a very good game. There's many issues with this game. Whether it be the bad performance of the game, or the characters and many other issues. It definitely has a lot of also glitch problems. Now, a very much over the top and scenes for Saturday morning cartoon style game with Agents of Mayhem, which is definitely interesting and different. I'll be honest, I do like this game, and I find it interesting. As someone who likes over the top action stuff, it's definitely pretty enjoyable. Also, a game I've mentioned quite a few times over the last few years that a lot of people should give a chance. A Plague Tale Innocence is definitely one of those experiences you should give a chance. And it's interesting, in fact, it takes place during the plague. Next up, Assassin's Creed The Ezio Collection. So all three of the Assassin's Creed 2 games. Also, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Assassin's Creed Rogue, which is one of my personal favorites. Assassin's Creed Unity, in my opinion, one of the more overhated games that doesn't deserve the hate it gets. At least not nowadays. Given they've worked out most of the major glitch issues over the years. Also, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which I kind of have more mixed feelings on of games. And the last of the AC games, Assassin's Creed Origins, which was an interesting, I think, game in the series. It would start really the current day format of the game series. Next up, the first Attack on Titan game, which is getting a bit harder to find nowadays, strangely enough, and the price is starting to go up as well. So it is definitely an interesting experience, and if you're a fan of Attack on Titan anime, I do recommend it. If you're looking for solid, great first-person viewpoint games with good story and everything and gameplay, BioShock Collection is definitely a good one to go with. And next, of course, needs no introduction, Bloodborne. Arguably one of the best of the exclusives to PlayStation 4. And to this day still remains officially exclusively to PS4. Next up we have Borderlands Game of the Year Edition, which has all the extra content. Borderlands 3, which I still have yet to actually play. Then we have the only physical Call of Duty game I actually have, as this was bundled with my console when I bought it back a while ago. But I'll be honest, surprisingly, even though I've tried a couple of previous COD games I did not enjoy, strangely enough, I actually like the single player campaign in Infinite Warfare, surprisingly. And I never thought I would actually even enjoy any Call of Duty games, but I actually ended up enjoying Infinite Warfare, weirdly enough. Then we have a very interesting, crazy action game, Control, which is definitely up there as one of the interesting experiences from past gen. Also, of course, the very much despised and still has a lot of major glitch issues even to this day, Cyberpunk 2077. I remember finding this on clearance at Walmart, actually. I believe this was on clearance for something like $5, which is kind of crazy. Then we have, of course, the music that's playing in the background from Dark Souls 3. The Fire Fades Edition, which includes additional DLC content. Next up we have arguably probably one of the best zombie games, in my opinion, over the last so many years, and that being Dead Rising 2. It is unfortunately, Dead Rising 1 was basically very vanilla on content, what you could do. And from what I understood, Dead Rising 3 and 4 were not that great either. Unfortunately, it seems like this game was easily the pinnacle of the franchise as a whole. Then you have, of course, Devil May Cry 5, which is easily my favorite of the DMC series. Then we have a game that I feel has sadly been, by a lot of people, has actually already been rejected or left behind. And I think Dead or Alive 6 deserves a little more love than it gets. It is a great installment in the series, and I love the new super moves they included. It was great. And in general, I think it's still arguably, even if it's only a small step up graphically and detail and stuff from 5, still it's easily one of the best looking fighting games, bar none. Then we have Deadpool, which is presently a game in recent time. I do not see this game very much out in the wild, mostly because of copyright stuff, which is why they don't produce any new copies of this, and why it has sort of become a collector's item, like the Wolverine Origins game for PS3 and 360. Then, of course, we have the great Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls, which is a game I definitely very highly regard at this game. Dishonored 2. A solid, great experience. Sadly, it's not as good as the first game in the series. At least, for me anyways. Then we have Doom Slayer Collection, which includes, as you see, Doom, Doom 2, Doom 3, Doom 2016. So you get 4 solid Doom games, plus you even get like special bonus stuff you can put on your controller, poster, and other stuff, which makes it pretty cool and unique to have. Then we have the original version of Doom 2016, which this version also included no additional costs, the season pass of DLC. Then we have arguably my personal favorite, Doom VFR. A Doom VR game, and I think is probably the single best, pretty much, VR experience there is, at least on PS4. For me, it's between this and one other on-rail, like, shooting type of game as the best experience on the console. Then we have a game that I find myself defending a lot. DMC Devil May Cry. I understand some people actually really hate this game, I get it. Personally, I really enjoyed it. Especially this version of the game, which fixed most of the technical issues. Then, of course, you have Devil May Cry HD Collection, which now realizing I think I messed up in ordering it. Should be with Devil May Cry 5, but whatever. With that said, Next up, we have Dragon's Dogma Dark, which is definitely one of the best and probably more overlooked and underrated Capcom games in recent era Capcom. And yeah, this even includes all the DLC and everything. But it is getting harder to find now. Then we have an interesting survival crafting game with Fade to Silence, which is an interesting game that THQ Nordic released. It's definitely different, but it's available, as you see, in 2 regular languages audio and many languages and subtitles. But yeah, it's only in language-wise English and German, which is pretty cool actually. The game has German language. Also, Fallout 4, of course, which I still have actually yet to play Fallout 4. I have only played Fallout 3 and New Vegas so far. Then, after that, we have, of course, got to play Asia, Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater. I love the dread and look on the character's face on the cover art of Fatal Frame Maiden Blackwater. I still need to actually pre-order the other game through PlayAsia, which just recently got released, to try to get a copy while it's still available. Yeah, as you see, also includes free upgrade for PS5. Also, my personal favorite, at least of the Far Cry games I have played, is Far Cry 4. Now, may not be the best looking condition game, but keep in mind also I picked this up for like $3, so I'm not really complaining, and the disc itself is still in good shape. Even if the case isn't. Next up, one of the most bizarre and unique games in my collection, Gun Double Peace. One of the most bizarre and out there on-rail shooter games I have ever seen. Surprisingly, the game, by the way, actually works pretty good with the... It's just very weird. Definitely a very much Japanese sense of humor game. But to be fair, I enjoy Japanese sense of humor. But, yeah, that's not a game you're going to just see on the regular shelf at a game store. Next up, we, of course, have God of War 2018, or Data War as people refer to, which still remains arguably my favorite God of War game of all time. Ragnarok is in a close second. But I freaking love this game, because I have found myself going back time to time to this game and playing like a couple hours here and there just to enjoy the overall story. Also, one of the more overlooked, I think, mid-budget games in recent years that I actually think more people should check out is Greedfall. Definitely an interesting experience, to say the least. Then we have a very unique and different, I think, underrated RPG style game, weirdly enough, based on the John Wick movies, John Wick Hex. And I actually really dig the art style as well. It's basically like a living comic book. Also, another underrated game, and surprisingly still looks good for being a launch title of the PS4, that being Killzone Shadowfall, which is another game I remember finding for something like $4, so yeah. Quite a few PS4 games that I have collected have been very cheap, to say the least. Then we have another, arguably one of the worst games in the collection. Hey, when I originally picked this up, I did not realize how bad the game was gonna be. Boy, is there a lot of technical and performance issues with this game. Which is unfortunate, as it is a Square Enix game, and I was very disappointed in Square for this title. Next up is a game I've personally enjoyed quite a bit. Yes, it does occasionally have definitely frame rate drops here and there, especially as you go in farther into the game, but I'll be honest, I think the game gets far too much hate. Lichdom Battle Mage, I still quite enjoy the game for the experience it is. People can hate on, but I will continue defending this game. Now, if you want a crazy over-the-top action game, look no farther than Man Eater. It is definitely a very unique experience, to say the least. Another game I looked out and found on clearance. Also, a game I believe I picked up for like $2 from GameStop. $1.99 for this, which is crazy. I know definitely Mass Effect Andromeda gets a lot of hate, but given the price, like $2 for the game, I can't really hate on it, though. From what I understood, there's no way it should have gone away with being a $60 game originally, with all the issues it had. Then we have arguably one of the best, I think, Souls-like experiences from an indie developer, being Mortal Shell, a game I highly recommend a lot to people. Then we have Nier Automata, arguably one of probably the best well-written overall games, at least universe building, and in general, great philosophy and making you think about things. I actually really appreciate about this game. The complexities are far more than some people realize. Then we have Nioh, one of the best, I would say, like soul-style experiences with a good difficulty that you'll get out there. I think Nioh, though, really stands on its own and shines on its own. Nioh 2 even more so really excels. But if you want something similar to Dark Souls but want a little different feel and style, Nioh is a great pick. But like I said, I think Nioh 2 is better. Personal opinion, though. I like that it goes even more over the top with the action and stuff, and that really helps Nioh set itself apart. Also, of course, the base original vanilla version of Persona 5, which definitely has helped the series become, I think, bigger in recent era. Also, of course, Persona 5 Royal, which is the best way to go nowadays, given it is very affordable and it includes all the extra content. Also, if you like, of course, well, if you like Hyrule Warriors and other, like Samurai Warriors and stuff style games, Persona 5 Strikers is a good game to check out. Then we have the remake of Prey, or reimagining if you will, which actually surprisingly turned out pretty solid overall. Which I think surprised a lot of people. This game ended up better than anyone expected it. Then we have Re-A-Reckoning, Kingdoms of Amur, which was a very cool experience on the 360. Last few games. Next we have Resident Evil Revelations, one of my personal favorite modern era Resident Evil games. It has more of the classic Resident Evil feel, at least for me. And crazy to think it originally was released on the 3DS. Also, Resident Evil 7, which is probably the best, at least compatible experience you can have on VR. At least that is not a VR exclusive game. This is arguably probably the best experience. Then, of course, we have Resident Evil 8, or Village, which sadly, if you want to play this in VR, you'll have to get PS5 and also get the VR2, unfortunately. And last is my personal favorite overall VR exclusive experience, and that being Until Dawn Rush of Blood. This is one of the most awesome on-rail shooting games I have ever played in my life. Legitimately, I put this on par with games like